State Controller Brandon Woolf. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you for coming. You are, again, the State Controller of the state of Idaho, and the State Controller's office is one of a few offices, obviously an elected office, but it really engaged in the continued functioning of the state of Idaho. And what I mean by that is you don't make laws as a state controller. You don't make, like executive orders. You carry out in an executive manner the wishes of the legislature. You monitor the financial state of Idaho. You do all these things. And that's really, if we don't have a properly functioning state controller, things fall into disarray. People don't get paychecks. We don't file insurances correctly. We don't, like, all of these different things. And that all lands in your lap.
Exactly. So as the state controller, I'm like one of the 7 constitutional officers in the executive branch. And we work closely with the governor and his team, but also that's why when our founding fathers here in Idaho established and set up our state constitution, they wanted to have a controller separate than under the governor. And so that's for that separation of duties, that arm's length, and to have that check on the governor at that time. So the legislature, they set the appropriation, they're setting the bills for the funding for each state agency. Our role is to monitor the actual dollars being spent by each agency and how that ties closely to their actual budget and monitoring that over the year. And like you said, we pay all the state employees, we pay all the bills. But it's having that monitoring going on day to day to help that financial integrity that our citizens are expecting or hoping.
And that's kind of at the core of, like, Idaho has a credit rating, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so you are integral to maintaining like a perfect credit rating, because essentially if the bill's due on the 1st, you're paying it absolutely on the 1st. You don't want to deprive the Idaho citizen of any interest that might be due by paying it early, but you certainly are not flirting with anything past due.
Yeah. Our role, and we work closely, the treasurer's office has a large responsibility in that, and working with the rating agencies to maintain that AAA rating.
Right.
And a lot of that's based off of our revenues and how we're doing financially as a state. Our role is from the financial statements, putting that paper, like if you're going to get a loan, the creditor's going to look at it and say, how well are you doing financially?
Right.
Are they paying their bills? What's their credit rating? It's the same thing that they're doing at the state level, is reviewing how well are we financially? Are we pay our bills on time? Are we doing that? And that's our critical role of being able to help maintain that AAA rating. And it's not just at the state. Local governments get to use that same rating when they go to get paper.
Oh, I had no idea. So if like Ada County, for whatever reason, had to go get, apply for some kind of leverage.
Some type of bond, whatever, if it's some school or whatever, they're using the state's AAA. And so it benefits so many other ways than just the state itself.
Now, if they're benefiting from, say, Ada County uses the state's AAA rating, is the state then, what capacity does the state have, or responsibility does the state have to step in if Ada County does not fulfill its obligation? Because it's like, look, you're using my credit rating, but you're going to drive it like you stole it. So like, that's not good.
Well, from that standpoint, yeah, that's a great point. But the state, I think there's that jurisdiction difference of like, hey, stay in your lane, and that it would be the same with the feds coming in and trying to step in and tell a state how to run and do their business.
Sure.
The county has a great team there, Trent Triple and the commissioner working doing.
Yeah, I'm not trying to pick on Ada County, of course.
But it's just as an example, like you're using, that's our part, is just say, hey, they better keep doing their job. We'll watch that. And that kind of leads into the bigger picture of our discussion today and talk about from a transparency standpoint too.
This is a big thing, right? The concern that people, DOJ was DOJ on the federal level. And I know we have a, DOJ in Idaho, and we also have an office of efficiency evaluations. And
performance evaluation.
Yeah. Which is interesting because that's been around for a long time. People saying like, look, how is everything going? And big team goes in and investigates, creates reports, which is awesome. But from a government spending standpoint, there has always been an anxiety. Do you remember that movie Independence Day?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Right at the end, it's like the president finds the underground base where they're like studying all the aliens.
Right.
And then Jeff Goldblum's dad, that old funny actor, and the president, he's there, and the president's like, how'd you guys fund all this stuff? It's like, you don't think they really spent $40,000 for a hammer, $20,000 for a nail. And the idea is that you're always siphoning off funds, or that the state is siphoning off funds for its own pet projects that are not approved or transparent. But you guys are working really hard in the controller's office to say, no, man, like these are all of our cards.
Exactly. And that's the biggest piece I take is we want to have more citizen engagement. And we're seeing that more and more. And I hope it's in the right direction.
Right.
But one of the key pieces of why people aren't becoming engaged is one is they don't trust. They don't trust government. And we have a double edge. We're the government and we're the finance. And so there's two things there of, that trust is at an all-time low. And from a standpoint of saying, what can we do to help build that trust back in government? How can we build that trust in Idaho government? And
forget the federal.
Let's
just focus on.
And we know all your great big audiences here in town, right? So here at the state of Idaho, we want to drive that.
There's no parking that car back in the garage. Man.
So Senator Crapo and Rish, we apologize. Keep doing your great work. We appreciate it.
Hopefully Senator Rish will be on again. I'm sure. I've very much enjoyed my conversations with him anyway. But and Trent Triple, to your point, Trent Triple has the ballot verifier. He's working extremely hard to instill faith in the integrity of Ada County elections. So what is the push towards transparency? How are you guys bringing that transparency and allowing the average citizen to essentially, for lack of a better word, kind of self-audit or glean information from the state controller's office to know, like, look, if you are worried about our spending or our positions, here's all the data.
We're opening the books.
Right.
We're opening books. Justice Brandeis said back in 1914, sunshine is the best form of disinfectant.
Right.
And so we open up the books. Clear back in 2013, January of 2013, we went live with the first Transparent Idaho.gov website. It was all the state data, all the payroll, all the pay rates for all the state employees, and all the vendor payments for all the bills we've paid. And it was great, but it was all PDFs. Maybe not the best for searching and looking and visualizations. And then over the years, we've added to that, and now Transparent Idaho in its latest and greatest form is such a dynamic site. But now my vision was always not just state data. So we can show, and everyone loves to look at pay rates.
Yeah, sure.
For some reason, I don't know what it is, but 98% of everyone that comes to our website, they're looking up someone's pay rate. But so we're looking at vendor payments. How much did we pay Amazon, or how much is the state paying this? But my vision was always, how can we have one place to go to? So we have 44 counties, 198 cities, 193 school districts and public schools and charters, and 900 plus taxing districts. If you were to go to that, you're looking at 1,400 different websites to go to. And how do you have that standardized to know that Ada County and Canyon County, Kootenai County, or the cities, Boise City versus my hometown of Preston and Napoleon Dynamite, how close are they? What's the standardization of how they report and do their information? And so we spent a lot of time standardizing so it's equal to equal there, apples to apples. And now you have one website to go to. And now you can compare and switch it. Even though great state of Ada has, a large budget, a lot of information, or Boise City, but now I can flip it to a percentage and I can compare. Now I can compare Ada County. How much do they spend? Sheriff Clifford is spending on public safety, on the jail, Jan Bennett's with prosecuting attorney's office, and the jail itself. Now I can compare. And how does that compare to Jerome County?
Interesting. So you can find efficiencies within and direct comparisons because again, like I think one of the problems with the paradox of choice is the more information you have, the more anxiety provoking it is for people to ingest it. Right.
True.
So you're saying like, hey, you can see everything. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like where do you even start? Right.
That's so true.
You start with, okay, let's start with an industry, law enforcement. Okay, let's start with countywide law enforcement. So we're going to be doing, let's say Sheriff Clifford. So then you can compare, look, are we doing a better job, or is he doing a better job with the dollars than, say, Bonneville County or Kootenai County?
Or Donahue over in Canyon County. And now you can compare that. And now if I'm a county commissioner, I'm the public policy maker, whatever that is, if you're a county commissioner, a legislator, or city council. Now I can do, not necessarily and this was never meant as a gotcha. This website was meant to be for best practices and how do we build trust?
Wait, what do you mean? What do you mean a gotcha? I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
If the idea is that, and I feel very passionately about this because if the idea is, look, if the public knows information X, like if they can compare Sheriff Clifford to Sheriff Donahue, okay, and somebody says, well, you shouldn't let them do that because they're going to be upset once they see that. If that's the thinking, It's like, you're lost, man.
Yeah.
It is not the government's role to pick and choose based on what they think people will or will not be happy about. That's
Exactly.
not it. So like, I'm very sorry to interrupt, but that's so the opposite of what people should be doing, for
Exactly.
better or for worse. And if it ends up being a gotcha, I'm sorry. If it ends up being good for you, you're welcome. Like, I don't know what to tell you. That's not your choice.
I think you're spot on. I mean, in the sense of, we're not driving that from the standpoint from the government to like, let's get this, angling one area over another, but to let it drive itself.
Right.
And let the citizens or those policy people come to that on their own, to be able to drive that. We can help drive that and give that information and build that. And so, being able to help drive and say, I have better data now to feel more confident in the decisions I'm going to make. And, obscurity is the best friend of conspiracy. And, if you're hiding something or you're not sharing something, what's going on behind closed doors, right? What's going on? And there's so many we get almost daily information requests of this and this and this. And we point them to Transparent Idaho. Go look here, because we have it and you can look at yourself. But there's others that are like, they're becoming more and more engaged and involved in their local government. There's a large community, and it rhymes with Rocatello. So I won't say the name, but maybe it might be Pocatello. There's some great questions and great things being brought up to say, hey, what's being spent? What's being done? And from that standpoint, hey, we can hold the public officials accountable. What they're driving, what they're budgeting, what they're doing, how that money's being spent.
Right.
And so now it's being able to say, hey, I can compare. And, we started with the counties. We started with the cities.
Sure.
The taxing districts, the mosquito cemeteries and stuff.
Sure.
And then, of course, no one has an opinion. You haven't had anyone on talking about education. So, Matt, one of the biggest things is the legislatures put a lot of money in and funded and invested in education. And there's all the discussion, and I'm not going to get into that side
for sure.
But the part I will talk about from the education is, what did we load? We loaded over 30 million rows of transactions, of financial transactions for the 198 school districts for the last two fiscal years, two school years.
Millions of transactions that we can go through and essentially self-forensic audit.
Correct.
Wow. And that's all on Transparent Idaho.
Transparent Idaho.
Wow.
So now if you want to track the pencils spent in Coeur d'Alene, have at it. But the key thing
then
is,
they'll be like, are they really there?
are they really there?
I see this line item,
right.
But I'm going to have to see this hat.
Show me this pencil. Yeah, exactly. Show me that rat hat we were talking about earlier.
Seinfeld. Yeah, exactly. Like, and then fine. Yeah, you can ask, but at least you know.
You have a starting point.
Actually, this is really relevant. Relevant for a lot of reasons, but I had a candidate on recently for one of the May election positions, and he was making a claim about the amount of money spent by one city in a library district versus another city in a library district, and total budgets and stuff. And he was articulating these things, and the numbers I didn't have a way immediately to check these numbers, right? And they also seemed like, that doesn't seem right. But again, like, I try to not, just overtly argue with people unless I know something specific. But the second it was over, I was kind of wondering, like, I wonder, if I could figure this out. And very thankfully, people reached out almost instantaneously and were like, these numbers are not accurate. And they sent me links to stuff. And I was able to figure out, like, oh, okay. And then the question becomes, what do you do with that? Right? Like, okay, so you have somebody who, let's give a charitable interpretation, misspoke or didn't, whatever it might have been. But it's having the capacity for the average person, even me within a conversation. It's like, if I can tap into something real fast and be like, okay, let's just check, that's really valuable.
That's valuable.
Yeah.
I love for the day of, and I'm sure it's happened, or I hope it happens, that they're sitting there down at the Capitol and legislature they're in the middle of a committee hearing and they pull up, oh, just a second, I'm going to look on Transparent Idaho. Well, this is what it says right here. Right. Or they're at a city council meeting or a county commission meeting. I'd love for them to be able to pull up and, well, actually, here's what we're seeing. Here's the facts.
Yeah. Do you, I don't mean to out you, but when you're saying that 98% of people come to do a salary lookup, who's the person they look up the most?
Oh,
or like
that's a great one.
Top three.
Let me give you this. They're looking at universities. So Boise State,
University
U of I.
president.
Well, I don't know if it's a specific person. There are times where we can do that a little,
Yeah.
dive into the specific, but they're looking at Boise State, they're looking at university employees and IDOC, Idaho Department of Corrections.
Oh.
So I'm sure it's correctional officers looking up.
Derek.
Yeah. Yeah. So all Breeze employees are looking up the other employees to see, what are the other correctional officers making? So it's incredible. I used to run the payroll division in the controller's office. And during the legislative time and right during when they were doing pay raises, we'd probably get 50 to 75 to 100 information requests a week. What's all the nurses make? What do all the correctional officers make? What does so-and-so make?
Sure.
And we just get tons and tons. Now with our Transparent Idaho, they all go on and look at, all the reporters, all the citizens, all the employees know to go up and look that up. So,
this level, do me a favor, by the way, can you just push this straight? Yeah, you're good. Because you're leaning it. All right. And again, I love what you're saying. This level of transparency and program to essentially eliminate man hours spent and provide superior information access to the average citizen. It's one that I'm starting to see across Idaho. Like obviously on a localized level, Trent Triple is doing it with his ballot verifier, which is beautiful. And he can now point people directly to, he's like, you want to audit the entire election system? Here it is. And like, if you find any error, you just let us know. And like, we will correct it immediately. No one ever does. In the Department of Motor Vehicles, I had that director on recently. Fantastic conversation. Similar kind of thing, like incredible efficiency and transparency, eliminating man hours, eliminating costs to the taxpayer, improving access to services. Secretary of State Phil McGrain, same thing. Like his website is fantastic. And it seems that it's almost like at this point, if you are a private citizen and you have an issue, if you don't, like, it's almost that there's zero barrier to entry to actually find out the reality of get the hard data to say either I have a gripe or no, I don't really have a gripe.
I think
that's it.
I think you hit it spot on, is how do we reduce that barrier?
Right.
And two, ours is to get the message out that this exists. And that's probably the same for Trent, for Phil, all the rest of them, to say this data is and this information is available. And I think it's just growing and growing. And I think I talked about trust being one of the downsides of where people and citizens are not being engaged. And I think the second one is there's so much data.
Right.
Who do you trust? When you and I grew up, how many TV stations? I had 3.
Right.
Okay. Had ABC, NBC, CBS.
Sure. I remember as a kid, I was like 6 and I snuck downstairs one night to watch TV and it was like the TV channels weren't 24 hours yet. So I think I found one TV channel with like a video.
That didn't have all the...
Yeah. And like one of them had a video of like a frog. I was like watching a frog at midnight. I'm like 6 years old, right? Yeah, but I agree with you.
And so, and we had Walter Cronkite, and that's the way it is, you know? Now we have hundreds of stations. We have streaming. We have websites. Where do we get our information? Where do we get our news, and who do we trust? So for that news and that data. And you can go on to sites and say, okay, this site, this TV station leans to the left. This one leans to the right. And this one's maybe a little more moderate. Who do you trust? And so from that standpoint too, is we really are trying to take that into consideration as well. When you have hundreds of millions of rows of data, how do you make that easier for the citizen to be part of this? And so I always joke with my staff and say, I want to make this as easy so that my grandma or my grandpa could do this.
Right.
If you're an activist and you're involved, and maybe you're tracking transportation or education, pick your topic. How do we make that easy? And so that's where we're diving in more and more now with AI, doing beta testing to say, all right, I want to compare Boise City to Twin Falls, to Idaho Falls, to Coeur d'Alene. And I want to look at their Parks and Rec spend for the last 5 years. Type that up, put that in your prompt, spit that out.
Right.
How do we make that easier? How do you compare school districts? What are they spending for administrators, facilities? How much is actually going to the students? Can we put that as a visualization? So that's where we're driving for the future of how do we help get that information to make that more digestible, more consumable for the citizen as well. It's one to have a data dump, but how do you make that more consumable too?
Yeah, and I think that last piece is the number one piece. You can, let's say you have the secrets to everything. You got Roswell, you got right. JFK, you got the whole bit, but it's all in German. and we don't speak German. You're like, well, that's useless. And I very much view large data dumps and the articulation that's like, well, we fulfilled our obligation. We gave people the data. You gave us 100,000 pages of PDF. Nobody without a dedicated team for like a year is going to be able to sift through that. So it's almost that it feels as if at times government agencies are hiding things through like not obscurity, but it's almost like they're hiding things through like enormous complexity. It's like it's too complex and too time consuming to digest this. You have to give it to people if you really want people to consume it. You have to give it to them in a manner that they can actually understand in a reasonable time frame.
That's so true, so spot on. And I think the comments and the feedback we're continually receiving, because we're trying to get that, understand that as a consumers. What do you need? How do we help provide this to you better? Right. How do we make this that I can get these in small chunks or bites, that I can rely on this and trust this data?
When you say that 98% of people come to your site and they're really just looking for payroll stuff, that great. You have people that are coming to do this. That's fine. But is there something where you're like, look, 49 out of every 50 people that come here, they're just looking for this thing, but they really should be looking at X. Like, what's the information that you have present that people could tap into? You're like, because if people started paying more attention to this thing, that would be more telling, or that would be relevant to them.
That's a great question, Matt. I mean, one of the things this week, this Friday, not to let the cat out, I don't know when this will host or post, but this
you
Friday,
tell me, I'll post it today. Yeah.
So the very first DOGE legislative committee is going to meet this Friday. And I had fun last week. I had an afternoon, I had an hour. I dumped some of this public data from Transparent Idaho, and I put it in the AI, I put it in ChatGPT, analyzed this out-of-state travel for last fiscal year. And being able to say, how can we be more efficient? What should we be more effective? Now, that's as a state government.
Sure.
But as a citizen, you may have your specific things to say, what are you interested in? If it's finance, if it's education or transportation or natural resources.
Cloud seeding,
right? Or contrails.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. How much do we spend on cloud seeding operators in the state of Idaho?
So maybe we need to look that up. So, but from the standpoint of, okay, I can do analysis now and say, how much did we spend on airlines? Okay. Quickly get that. Well, how much did we spend between Spokane and Boise, Boise and Salt Lake, Boise and Denver, Boise and Portland? Now we can get a group rate. All state employees pay for on their own P card to do their own travel. But what if we had one booking agency and say, okay, now we've got the benefit of the mass economies of scale. Now we can get a discount. I run and say, okay, ChatGPT, based on this, we spent X million dollars on out-of-state travel on airlines. What kind of savings could we look at if we had a central booking? Boom.
Okay, so that's
hotels, rideshare. You could go so much. What could we do with Delta or Alaska Airlines and say, all right, we have 1,000 employees go every month to Coeur d'Alene, but they fly into Spokane, rent a car, drive to Coeur d'Alene. What type of savings could we get if we have this mass booking and works that way? We could save so much more. So those are the things I hope that just looking niche here, just as a quick example. And I think that's what citizens could dive in and look to from their standpoint. What's their interest?
Right. And even, hey, say you're a booking agent. Right now, you're an airline booking agent living in the state of Idaho. Go to Transparent Idaho and pitch the state. Feel like, look, this is how much you spend on all these different things. I could come at you and offer you this service and with this amount of savings.
Yep.
One really interesting thing about the connectivity and the nature of the world we have now, if you just look at social media, for instance, you could never anticipate the type of things that people come up with on social media. Like, we could make the absolute best entertainment department in the world and get the 10 best entertainers. Those people would not hold a candle to the creative ingenuity and insanity that the general populace, if unleashed onto a platform, could come up with. So it's almost like Transparent Idaho is this fertile earth of like, this is the raw data. Grow something out of it, propose something, because you may or may not know, you likely don't know all of the different combinations of creative solutions. Just like you brought up, like, I wouldn't think, hey, let's batch book or like use one air or whatever it might be. but people could come up with those things, and that creates savings for the state, and then everybody wins.
And how do we make that easier to say, citizens have ideas? How can we like, hey, let's gather them, share them? How do we make that so we can consume that as an agency, as a state controller's office, to make that easy for them to share back?
Dude,
we're pushing this way. How do we help bring that back in too?
You guys should run a contest. You should literally have like a 2026 contest where you unleash the data onto people, and you're like, whoever comes up with the best cost-saving program, we will award you a $10,000, prize or grant or something. Do something. Or like whatever the saving, we'll give you 10% of the savings. So now you
capitalism,
have
right? At its best.
At its best.
Free market.
And then you essentially get a finder's fee. It's like, and then if you're getting 10 or 20% of the overall savings, then you're incentivized to find the greatest possible savings, and you'll get really smart. Because like, I could save you $1 million, 200,000 for me. Boom.
So like that. Why not? I love the idea, the concept.
Yeah.
We need to think outside the box more.
Right.
I know we get government has to stay in these nice little box and things and follow your process and procedures. But I think there's opportunities where we can say, hey, where can we be more innovative, more thoughtful, more approaching? Stay within our lane. But I love the concept like that.
But this is, in my mind, this is one of those perfect within your lane, because you're not as a state controller saying, hey, I'm going to dedicate taxpayer man hours to solve this problem. What you're saying is, I'm going to unleash the possibility onto the populace. And let's say 1,000 people take up the charge. Well, it's on their dime, and they only get reimbursed if they find something that resolves a problem for us and saves us money. So it's like, yeah, we'll give you $100,000 if you save us $1 million. And if you don't, we're not out anything. So like, that's perfectly staying in your lane without taking risk.
Exactly. And from the standpoint, then I would have to take and say, I've got to go to the legislature. I've got to ask for a team and ask for some more positions, and I got to give me more personnel so I can do some other data analytics.
Right.
This way, turn it over. Those that have interest, they're going to dive and go like crazy.
God bless him, man. What a crazy thing. That's wild. So that's the nature of Transparency Idaho. Now, can you get into specific department spending? So like, if I wanted to look at not just salaries, but something with a BSU, like, I don't know, field maintenance. Okay. So there's a criticism of higher education, that higher education, at least in part, has veered away from the original charter of education and more into an entertainment and leisure providing mechanism that entices people that get educated on the side. It's like, we're going to have big football games. We're going to have big basketball games. We're going to have swim meets. We're going to have all of these different things. Wouldn't you like to come and watch this? And by the way, you can study poli-sci on the side and poli-sci on the side, right? So there is that criticism. And you have, the UC Berkeley redid its stadium, I think about 15, 20 years ago, to the tune of $500 million. Check this out. This is hilarious. They were selling the right to a seat for $250,000. Okay, so if you're a fancy alumnus, they're like, hey man, would you like to buy the right to purchase a ticket for the seat? Now, this is a really important piece. You don't have a right to the seat. Okay, so to be clear, you're not buying a lifetime ticket. You're buying the right to buy a ticket for that seat whenever you want. So a game's coming up and you're like, you know what? I'm going to buy the ticket for the seat. Game. I want to see the Stanford game, and I'm going to buy my seat. So you paid your $250,000 for the right to go ahead and purchase the ticket for that seat. I'm surprised they didn't sell that many. They thought it'd be very popular with who? I don't know. But like the hippies in Berkeley,
didn't go for it.
The old blues were not going for it. But there was a large criticism of that. It's like, how much are we spending in athletics versus, like I went in as a math major, but I switched to rhetoric. It's like, how much money did the rhetoric department get? And I very much enjoyed my degree. And, so there is that criticism. Does Transparency Idaho allow you to take it down to a granular level where it's like, how much money went through the athletic department at BSU last year?
So, from that standpoint, we do have that. We have, and so you'll be able to dive. Now, the universities, they have their own and what they report to us, so it's a little bit harder.
Sure.
But for all the other state agencies, we have down to the transaction line. And when we first went live, we had a page for each county, and we loved the idea and the feedback we got from the citizens. And so we built a page for each state agency. So if you want to go look at the Department of Lands, you can go to the Department of Lands, click on their page. It'll pull open their budget, their actual, all their employees. It'll put their top vendors. the number of vendors that they pay the most. So maybe it's Office Depot
Sure.
or some helicopter for putting out fires. But then we have every single transaction. We have all their travel. We have all their agreements and contracts. I had a phone call yesterday from a citizen saying, I'm curious about this contract Department of Lands had for helicopters. And who received it? Did an Idaho company get it out of state?
Sure.
We could dive into that now. We can look at that contract, pull it up. So we have that down to that transaction level data. And that's kind of your earlier question is, what do they have interest? Not just looking at employee salary, but now I can dive in to look at where is the money being spent on operating expenditures. Like to your example of the football seat. Where is this money being spent at agency XYZ?
To this end, I had Ron Nate from the IFF, president of the IFF. He came in several times, had great conversations with him, and he was critical of some of the spending that law enforcement had done, specifically ISP around some vehicles. And they had also had a piece of legislation proposed to get a helicopter that would be utilized statewide. And he was not a fan of it. Totally fine.
Right.
But he was also articulating like, look, they purchased, I think it was like 7 or 9 Mustangs he was like, you don't need a Mustang if you're in law enforcement. Now, again, I don't know. And this was his position.
Right.
But it took me getting the director of ISP, Colonel Gardner and Bill Gardner on to understand, we bought Mustangs for a fast intercept program. So when you have a really fast speeder, you need a car that can catch that car. The Mustangs were also something like $15,000 less than the next available car, because you can't just buy a Honda Civic. You have to buy like a Durango. You got to buy a Tahoe.
It's heavy enough
like that.
to put all.
That's
stuff
right.
on.
You gotta trick it out like with all the requisite hardware, all these different things. And he's like, and by the way, we have a 700 vehicle fleet. So when you're talking about, like 9 vehicles, you're not talking about a significant number of if we had 20 vehicles and half of them are Mustangs, okay, I got it. Well, we don't. We have 700. And interestingly enough, what portion of ISP's budget is fuel? Right.
And you could dive in and see that.
Right. And that's huge. So then you realize there's the criticism of the Idaho budget, government budget, growing faster than a certain rate. Well, there are departments that are beholden to inputs that they have no control over. So if gas goes up more than 3 or 5% and ISP's budget goes up more than you would like, well, what portion of that is something that we can even affect, right?
So
like
true.
you have these
true.
problems.
So true. And I think you come back to, in that example and that question and comment, Matt, is the context behind the data. And I use Transparent Idaho as like a tool. Just as is electricity, fire, wind, whatever. I mean, it's a tool. It's a hammer. You can use a hammer to build a beautiful home, beautiful studio like this,
right,
or you can build it to tear something down. And what's the context behind the story? So like when we went live with the counties, in your example with this ISP and Ron Nate there, it's the same thing. The counties were like, okay, property tax or cash revenue. How much do they have in rainy day? Counties were fearful, like, well, if we put all that on Transparent Idaho, then the legislature's going to take it from us. Legislature, we want that information. So I was playing Switzerland. All right, let's do it.
They all get mad at you.
Yeah, we all get mad.
The counties are like, don't you dare. And the legislature's like,
you need to put it on there.
Have it up today.
Yep. So we work with it because it makes sense. Put it on there. And then tell with the counties and say, tell your story. Give your context behind it. Why do you have such a large cash reserve? Well, maybe they're remodeling the courthouse.
Sure.
They need a new jail. So tell your story. What's the context behind it? And so I always tell people, they think it's back to that gotcha. Like, we found something. Like, make sure you understand the story behind it.
Right.
And I think that's a key thing too, of like, okay, we found something. Being a good researcher, a good reporter,
Sure.
You want to check it out, confirm it, solidify it. And that's that same thing, I think, of being able, you have all this data. And in your example of that with the Mustangs, maybe there is a story behind it.
Right. Right. There are very specific needs, and it's cheaper than the alternative. This was wild. One of my former podcast years back, I was interviewing the president of the teachers union, which, by the way, the teachers union in that former state is totally different than the experience I've had in the teachers union in this state. And the teachers union in Idaho is a completely different animal.
I can imagine.
And in the former state, I was not a fan. And so I have the president on to do a show, there had been this big strike, and, you know, people were really worked up about it, and they'd gotten past it, and she's glowing because she got, you know, the teachers, you know, everything that she wanted, and she's criticizing the school board, all of this stuff. And finally I get her pinned down. We're going line, but she's like, well, they had line item 17. I'm like, I don't know what a line item is. She's like, it's a line in a budget. I'm like, an idiot, right? And I'm like, well, what was 17? She's like, they were saving money. They were stashing away money. I was like, for what? And it turns out she found a $4 million account that the Board of Education was marking as an expense. It was $1 million a year. And she was like, they were saving money. They were saying it was an expense. They had the money. I was like, what was the money for? Turns out they were saving up for a $5 million book purchase. And they were like $3 or $4 million into it. Every single year they'd save $1 million because they can't take a $5 million hit the year that they need the book. So they save up. It's called book refresh. It's very, very common.
Yes.
But because there was no story behind it, because the populace didn't know, and the teachers union, again, that one I was not a fan of, was telling people that the district was lying to them and faking expenses, they gained favor and ultimately ripped the $4 million for books out of hands and gave a one-time raise to the teachers. So and by the way, when people found out that that was what happened, it was not a super positive thing.
Sure it wasn't.
People were really not happy about it. And, you know, I would actually say justifiably. It's like, listen, people should get paid, but we should also have refresh for textbooks, right? Like but again, the story, to your point, the story, why do you have this? Like say a city has $1 million rainy day fund or a $10 million rainy day fund. Okay. Why do you need that much? Well, we've had swings of decreases of $15 million. We don't want to default, or we have this other thing going in. Like this money it's not what it looks like, you know, but explain that to people.
Right. And that comes back to that whole citizen engagement. How many people have shown up to a county commission where they're setting the budget, or the city?
Right.
We're out here. How many people have shown up to the Eagle, the city council, when they're setting the budget? Maybe one, maybe two, maybe zero. And that's that standpoint there of back to that example you gave with the teachers union in that case. What was the PR? What was the understanding of telling that story? And I think that's a key thing, that how we can be better. I think as government, we need to be so much better of how do we include and make that process that's a full 360 circle there of saying, hey, how do we have that involvement to make that easier, that you break down those barriers to make that easier for that citizen government relationship, to have that barrier to like understand, oh, we're setting aside that $4 million. We need to get to 5. Help us get there.
Right. Right.
It would have been a whole different story, right?
Right. Completely. And I think people would have, well, who knows?
Who knows? Right. Exactly.
The state controller is a partisan race, right? Like you have an R or a D or a, you know, constitutional, independent, whatever next to your name, but there's not a lot of discretionary action that really falls into your lap, right? Like you have the capacity to do a better job in that you make this big push to bring transparency, to create efficiencies within the office, to cost the state less money. But beyond that, there's not really like a partisan leaning here. It's not like, well, a Democratic state controller would do X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, man, like I got to sign the checks. Like I got to provide information to people. And it's the administration of that transparency that is really at the core of what you do, right?
You're right. You know, from the standpoint of Sentin, they're saying, is the position of the state controller very political? Probably not.
Right.
You compare it to the governor, lieutenant governor,
Sure.
McGrain's secretary, the attorney general. Running your finance hopefully is boring, right? You want your good accountant. You want it to be quiet, smooth, integrity, honesty, and those are the values and things you're looking for. From the standpoint, you know, my grandpa always would say, money isn't blue, it isn't red, it's green. Right. And I served in a church position where I was a leader and had the funds come in to help with a welfare standpoint. Maybe a family needed get back up on their feet. I was during the Great Depression, recession. And we had 20, 30 families that were out of jobs. Fathers weren't working, mothers weren't working, trying to help them. It was those sacred funds to help get them back on their feet or give them some food or help maybe pay the mortgage for the month. And I take it's the same thing here at the state level of being able to say, these are sacred dollars. These are the tax dollars, and making sure they're spent correctly and the integrity and honesty of what's going on. And I think that's the key point of staying. There is a little bit, you know, a big piece too, is I sit on the land board. And from the land board's perspective, that's a great opportunity to be set policy, set standards, and that's a whole other time we could have a conversation.
I would love to.
And we could talk more on the land board piece, but that's a very fun time to be able to spend to design policy for how do we help our beneficiaries and maximize our dollars, which we're constitutionally mandated to do. And that's I think that's a standpoint where maybe there is a little bit more from the political standpoint, or what's the background, who's the individual, who's the candidate that you want in the state controller spot.
Gotcha. Land board is direct appointment from the governor?
No, it's the 5 constitutional officers.
Oh, right.
The only
Phil
two,
McGrain, Secretary of State, Attorney General,
Superintendent Critchfield,
great.
Governor, and myself.
Gotcha.
The 2 that are not are the treasurer and the lieutenant governor.
Gotcha. There was that big discussion recently about the land board using outside counsel aside from the Attorney General, right?
Yes.
And the land board in particular is very, very important because we derive so much of our funds towards, say, education from like the land trust, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece of our mandate in the Constitution is to maximize our dollars values off of those state endowment lands. They're not public lands, they're state endowment lands that we received at statehood. And the better we do of increasing that and what we can distribute back to our beneficiaries, which the largest is K-12, then that's the less amount of tax dollars that have to go into that to help fund K-12.
So if you can increase the revenue we have from this fixed asset, then, and again, everything's on the table for that, right? But
then you get into the politics of what level do we try to make money off of our state endowment land?
Right.
What's kosher? What's available and what's allowable? What makes sense politically and everything else? So that's a whole nother bedtime story that we can talk about. But there's a key thing there of if we're doing a great job, we do a great job in timber. We grossed almost, I think it was about $85-90 million. We just closed our fiscal year. I haven't know what we netted, but let's say we netted 50-60 million net
like
off
50,
timber.
60. Yeah.
Then that goes in. Our trust is $3.5 billion, our financial trust that we have for the beneficiaries. So we have the land side, we have that financial trust, and the better we can do with that, then that's just helping. This last time I think we distributed $110 million that went to our beneficiaries. That's incredible. Great. And we're looking this next month in August, we'll know what the next one is of what we'll distribute. The endowment fund investment board will bring that to us and we'll decide on that.
I do have a lot of questions about the land board. Let's not hit it now.
All right.
We're talking about a lot of different things. So as far as bringing transparency, is there anything that we're missing, right? Like obviously this is derived to increase citizen participation, enable, I hate the word empower. It's like, but like really make it so that the average citizen can understand the better workings and financial aspects of the state. Is there anything else we're missing here?
I think the key part, Matt, is how do we continue we'll have more data.
Yeah, sure.
But how do we, like we say, how do we empower? How do we make that available? How do we make that my grandma can get on and do that and find that? But it's maybe more, some people are visual learners. Others just want to see the data and they can dump it out and see that big spreadsheet. But if that's that visualization, that's easy to spot anomalies or to look for things. And I think that's a part of how do we maybe add more demographics. So how much are we spending per mile of asphalt? What is that? How much does ACHD spend per another highway district or another county that doesn't have a highway district, but they do it as a county, like my home in Franklin and Preston? So how does that compare? How do we do demographics? How much is it spent mowing lawns at the city? Maybe that's not a big thing. Maybe it's how much is being spent on diesel fuel for school districts on school buses. Whatever it may be, how do we continue to drive that and say, make that easier for the citizen to be engaged? And so we're trying to hear them out. I love the story. Let's gamify this or do whatever
let's
thing.
Do it.
And let's say, take from the standpoint of how do we drive those things to make that easier, that we can all, high tides rise all boats.
Dude, I think you should do the pay to save campaign. We will pay you money if you can find a way for the state to save money. Pay to save campaign. You heard it here first.
We did.
Could you imagine if Idaho became the first state to literally say, we will pay you if you can help us become more efficient. we will cut you in on it because you're going to be saving everybody money and you will
Everyone
get a
wins.
finder's. Everyone wins. Pay to save
Pay to
campaign,
save.
Idaho. God bless the gem state. That'd be great. There's no way this will happen, but it sounds great.
We could give it a shot, right? Well, let's give it our best shot.
Would we have to ask the legislature?
I don't know all the ins and outs. Maybe we might have to
Dude, I
from
know
the
some-
standpoint of what.
I know some people. You know
got some-
more people. You got connections. I got like one.
Maybe we can present it at Doge this week and say, hey, what can we do? Let's get this
Dude,
going.
I'll text Rep Jeff Ehlers right now. Be like,
That's
come
right.
on, man.
That's right.
This sounds great. Senator Cook's on Doge too, isn't he?
I don't
No.
think Senator Lakey's the co-chair.
Okay, come on, Senator Lakey. Let's do this.
Right?
Pay to save.
Pay to save.
Gotta be good. Anyway, Controller Wolf, I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for your
thank you
time and
coming in.
having out. It was great to be with you.
Yeah, you as well. Let's keep the conversation going. And I really want to come back and touch on the land board as well, because one of the first times that I had Director Miller in for the first time, and he talked about the land board and how that funds K through 12. And the number of people that reached out were like, I had no idea
Right.
that's how this works. People loosely knew that Idaho had a fiduciary obligation to, get highest and best use for the assets we have, but they didn't know anything about, land production, revenue going to K through 12 and all these things. So I'd love to have you back on to chat about
Love to
that.
do that. Let's
Okay,
do it.
wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.